Welcome to the Victory Multisport podcast. I'm Coach Sarge, and I'm here with Coach Scott.
Hey there.
And Coach Kenny.
Good morning.
And thanks for the listeners coming back to part 2 of Ask the Coaches Anything.
One was a doozy. I can't wait for 2.
Right?
These questions are off the chart.
We ended on the most embarrassing moments, so we're going to pick back up, switch gears.
Any diarrhea this week? No, we're good.
All good.
All good. Sitting in the back row, so he's close. We're going to pick back up with the next theme, and this the theme of questions in this group were all about mental toughness. Athletes getting a little more serious with us on the questions, a little bit more insights from the coaches. So the first question's from Snipes. He actually did a good job sending in multiple questions to us. So Sniper's asking about nagging injuries, and not necessarily the injury itself, but managing the mental side of having to draw down the injury or the training plan to nurse that and to recover properly so you can come back strong. But with a reduced volume, not feeling like you're maybe heading to your goals and so forth. So, Coach Scott, I know you directly.
Yeah.
Coach Snipes.
I've had recent personal experience with this. So I have a what I would consider to be kind of a bum left knee. In my late 30s, I had microfracture surgery on my left knee, which is
kind of horrific, isn't it?
Oh, it is.
Yeah, it can end basketball players' lives or careers.
And I had a blood clot develop in the wake of it, so it made the rehab even more difficult. And I didn't race for probably 2 years.
Right.
The rehab was very long. But at the time too, I was also told, like, you're not going to run again. Like you're done. And my question was, well, what happens if I do run? And they were like, well, eventually you'll probably need knee replacement. It'll just get worse over time. You're going to be in more pain. And I was like, okay, I'm willing to take that trade-off. So I'm going to go run. And I was good until it was actually the Buffalo Creek half marathon that we ran as a team. Mm-hmm. I got towards the end of that race. I was like mile 11-ish, and I could feel it. Like it was tight, and I was like, oh man, like that could be a problem. And then I don't know if I raced again until this past December when I did my half Ironman in Florida. And so what I really had to work on. So at first I was like, okay, medically, I need to figure out, is there something medically wrong? And so I went to orthopedic. I had some x-rays taken, and the x-rays actually revealed that my left knee is equally healthy as my right. Mm-hmm. Like, even though there's discomfort in there, the knees themselves, they both show a little arthritis, but nothing that was material one over the other. So I was like, okay, that's good. And then I thought, well, what else do I need to do? And so I was talking to Shep at practice one day, and Shep made a comment like, maybe ever since you had that surgery, your legs have been out of balance, and that you need to focus on strength training. Mm-hmm. And so then I thought about that more. And then in a conversation with Kenny, he referred me to Shady Side, Sam Picarin. And so I went there, and Sam started looking at my legs, and he was like, oh my gosh, your left leg is super tight. And so there were many sessions where we just worked on mobility and getting the knots out of my left quad and just figuring out how to get that to fire. And then once we did that, then he was like, that quad is weak. And then we learned that my hips were also not loose. And I know this is getting fairly long-winded, but the point is that I had cascade of problems. It wasn't that the knee was a reflection of other areas, right. Multiple areas in my leg that I was not addressing correctly. And so what that meant was I had to change the way I trained. I had to think about it differently. So I went heavy on my swim. I went heavy on my bike, and on my run, I managed it. So I brought all my volumes way down, which for me was a big mental shift because I'm a runner.
You've been a runner.
I'm a lifelong runner. I'm a huge input output mentality kind of guy.
Did that depress you at all, having to change that?
Rattled my confidence a little bit because I thought, oh man, like my longest run was 10 miles and I thought I might get to 10 and then I don't know what's going to happen.
Your traditional race style and strategy's always been, manage the other two to blast the run.
Correct.
And now you're thinking, oh, am I really going to be able to blast the run?
Correct.
Like the table was flipped on you.
That's right. And so what happened was my run time. So I looked at my schedule and I said, okay, if this is the amount of time I was willing to dedicate towards the run, I've now got to carve that up and it's going to be strength, mobility, flexibility, all of that stuff. And then a little bit of running. And I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked because, at my age, I thought, in my experience, I thought, this is going to end poorly. Like I can already see this. And the opposite happened. My swim was fantastic. It was the best swim I've ever had in my life. I PR'd by like 4 minutes. And when I came out of the water, I was like, wow. My bike was, I don't know if it was a PR, but it was awfully close. Like I flew on the bike and I knew it was a good day because about 30 miles in, I thought, man, I'm not tired. And I looked down and I was averaging like 22 miles per hour. And I was like, this is awesome. And then when I hit the run, I thought, all right, we're going to go mile by mile. And unfortunately, I had spoken with Matthew the night before, and he had done this race the year before and gave me a lot of good advice on here's where you want to pick your spots on the run. And he warned me the first couple miles are extremely hilly. You wouldn't think in Central Florida that you would have hills, but these hills are huge.
They found them.
And they're steep, and just be ready for them. And then once you get past those first couple miles, it flattens out for a few. And that was very valuable because I remember starting the run and I went fairly easy. I managed through the hills. I hit the flats. And when I hit the flats, then I opened it up. And my run was slightly slower than what I would have liked, but only by a few minutes. And so the overall race experience for me was actually
better,
faster than I would have raced, than I think I probably have ever raced a 70.3.
Yeah, because Jeff, who's coming in today, he's got the same issue. He's called me just, a knee issue. And he's just saying, hey, I'm a little, I'm worried about taking that away. I have these races coming. If I get it fixed now, I could race later. Or and we're waiting for the doctor to say, but he's just like you said, I was really worried about what this is going to look like doing things different, and I think hearing you say, I focused more on the swim, I focused more on the bike, and I was only a couple minutes off on the run, but my whole race was better.
Yeah.
I think that hopefully gives people hope that talk to your coach, talk to your doctor, and then figure out what's going to be the best.
Yeah, the advantage of this sport is when you're training in all three disciplines, you're still stressing your cardio the same. So from a cardio perspective, I was totally fine. It was, the anxiety of are my legs going to hold up? But the reality is, you get in that race setting, you're loose from the bike, like you're not coming in off like into a cold run, so that will help. And the fact that you've put so much sweat equity into training for the race, you're in that race environment, you're very excited, it will carry you through.
Sure.
It definitely was. I was so surprised that I could approach my training differently this late in life and have a better result than I've ever had before. I was shocked.
It's insane.
It's good. I mean, I think it's the nature of the question that Snipes is asking here is, if I do this, am I still going to be okay? If I change my training plans because of this injury, will I still be okay? You'll be okay.
Yeah.
It will happen. It's just about managing it, and don't get so focused on each tick of the volume or each what you used to do or whatever. When you have an injury, it changes the plays that you have to run. It's just like a professional football team that loses their star quarterback for 2 or 3 games. the playbook completely changes to what the second string quarterback is really good at, and they run those plays, and they can still win games that way. So that's
Look at the 49ers. That's the fourth quarterback.
Exactly how you have to think about it. Because if you try to force the issue, all you're going to do is exacerbate the injury, extend the recovery time, if not make it so worse that it's going to take you completely off the schedule. You're going to be on the bench. You're going to be on injured reserve. You're going to be in surgery or medical treatment of some kind that's going to keep you from racing.
You hit the nail on the head when you said you have to let go of what you've done in the past.
Correct.
If you attempt to repeatedly compare yourself to whatever that prior experience was, it will just drive you crazy, and it will lead you to do things that are detrimental to your health and will likely prolong the injury, make it worse, prevent you from racing. I mean, that is the point, Sarge. The other piece of that is don't compare yourself to others. So I know we get sucked into that space sometimes with, and I'm proud of the work that everybody puts in, but you'll see stuff posted about so-and-so drilled this workout where they nailed this. Look, those successes are amazing and they should be celebrated, but you cannot benchmark yourself against that if you have a nagging injury. And I had to do that. Like I was training athletes that were crushing it, and I'm like, man, speed work is off the table. Like I will get a little bit in and I'll get just enough in to remind myself of what it feels like. But you have to be able to separate yourself from what everybody else is doing and recognize that your conditions are your conditions. You will still be successful. Be confident in your approach and it will be okay. But you got to put those blinders on every once in a while. Don't look at others.
That's right.
Don't look at your past.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good stuff. So some of the other mental toughness questions that are coming up from the survey are, is there, one of the other challenges that comes up quite often, and this is in the form of the question, but I'm paraphrasing again, is, people get in their head. I know we talked about Bull in the past when he did his full Ironman. If I don't get this time, I'm going to be upset. If I don't make this PR, time for this race, it's going to be terrible. It's going to be a terrible day. So, Kenny, on your side, what do you think? Like, how do we break people out of that mindset, I guess, or, give them a different perspective, if you will, an athlete, a different perspective on what does it really mean on race day? How do you really look at a race day?
Yeah, I mean, I like to try to have the conversation with the athlete of like, what do you want to happen on race day? So let's start there. So what are we chasing? Am I happy to just finish? I want the medal. I don't care what time it says. Or is it, hey, I want to be here, here, and here. And then we start looking at what are you putting in? So let's start looking at, okay, so if I want a 130 in the swim, but I'm actually targeting a 145, having those conversations so that race day, they're not like shocked. Like, hey, like I know you want a 135, but all your times are showing you that you're going to be a 140. So let's be okay with that. Or let's then focus on not trying to, or what if the current was so bad that you were on target for a 120, but it was a 125? Like, don't come out of the water so mad that you're going to blow up on the bike because you're trying to catch up. So I think that way I always try to approach it is, you don't know what's going to happen. In a 5K, you kind of know it's going to be over in 20 to 25 minutes, depending on where you are. Maybe 18. Who knows? Yeah. It's going to be over quick. Weather's not really, but 140 miles or 70 miles, there's so many. What's the heat? What's the temperature? Are you going to another area? What's the wind going to be like? Is there a tailwind? Hilly course, non-hilly course?
Road conditions, mechanical issues, just all kinds of things.
So like I always say to them, hey, let's create little goals that day. Let's try to come out and say, and I think Scott said it best one time, like, let's write your race plan down and let's review that quite often. Like, what's the day going to look like? What are we going to eat in the morning? What are we going to do here? What are we going to do there? So as we're starting to build that plan, we're understanding, hey, if I check all these boxes, I'm going to probably have a good day.
Yep.
Is it a great day where it's my A time? Is it my B time? Is it my C time? I always say, hey, let's get you to the finish line where you didn't die. You're healthy. You're healthy. Then let's go for that goal number 1. But if it's goal number 2, you were still happy. We are absolutely, let's celebrate the heck out of that. So I think it's just having that continuous, like, I know I've struggled at times, like, hey, I've done an 11-hour Ironman, but I just had a 14. I'm also 12 years older, and like my body's operating different. So that 131 I did on a 13-1, I may never have a 131. Okay. But I'm okay with that. But it's understanding in my mindset, hey, let me just work hard. Let me go get what I get. But let's talk to the athlete and say, let's start looking at your times that you're putting in on the bike. Let's start looking at your run times. Let's start looking at your swim time. Best case scenario, let's aim for this. Second scenario, let's aim for this.
That's right.
But just having that continuous
target goals, stretch goals,
continuous conversations,
micro goals for the whole race.
Your training times will dictate your race performance as well. Like I tell people that all the time. Like the whatever interval times and stuff that you see during your training sessions, those will all translate into your races. So that gets back to your 130 versus 140 comment. Need to be realistic about that.
Yes.
The other piece of that I love that you touched on was when I go into a race, I have a target time in mind. And I'm like, okay, look, and I think of it this way, a great day would be X and a good day is going to be Y. And then after that, it just turns into, well, let's get another one under the belt.
Correct. That's right.
And I often tell people too, you'll know, like when you get in there and you're going through the race, you're going to feel it one way or the other. And it's okay to adjust on the fly. It's also, you bring up a good point. Don't feel like you've got to chase your A time or your ideal time because you're only going to put yourself in a further deficit. And then you're going to jeopardize the goal of just finishing. Yeah.
And I think our conversation to Chris, honestly, it was at my dinner table when he said, if I don't get 14 hours, I'm going to be pissed. And I said, Chris, what if you get a flat tire? Are you going to are you going to quit right then and there? No, we're going to finish.
That's right.
You can't control what happens. Like Chris in Panama City, it was the most horrific swim they say they've ever had. Their 300 and some chips were pulled.
Right.
You can't control that. And now you're going to dictate the rest of your day. Like, thank God, like I come out of the water, one done. I'm going to come off the bike. I'll look at it and I'll know, okay, the second one's done. There's my third one. Mm-hmm. It's just being okay to have moving targets throughout the day. Because if we're on,
that's right,
let's go for it. If
Absolutely.
we're not on, let's still go for it. But let's be happy with whatever that is.
And I think that when you go to a race venue, you get into it. It's a 70.3. It's a 140.6. It's going to be a long day. And then you have environmentals. You have weather. You have heat, wind, rain, whatever it is, rough seas, rough swim conditions. You have to, I believe, encourage yourself that you are still here. You are still in the race. You are still making it happen. There are people that you don't even see because they didn't show up. They gave up before they even started. You are not giving up. You're here. As long as it's still safe to race, and that's what race officials will make sure of, race directors and Ironman will make sure of that, then you're still in it. And by being in it, you're now even raising yourself into the higher percentile of who's actually doing this today.
Hey, and some of those macro themes like that you just mentioned, like rough seas or super hot day and stuff like that, never lose perspective. That's Everybody's dealing with that.
That's right.
So you are not unique in that everybody else is probably having to chuck their goals out the door too. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. Like, don't lose perspective on the fact that you, to your point right there, you are in the mix of a race in adverse weather conditions. Yeah. Wear that with pride. When I ran Boston, it is legendary how bad those weather conditions were. And I remember being with two friends in the tent before we raced. And one of the comments that was made was, oh man, like it's starting to snow on top of this rain and it's getting windier. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I want this to get any worse. And I was like, dude, bring it. Like, let's just make this a legendary race at this point. Just make it as brutal as possible. And, cause at the time I was trained for a PR. I knew right then and there, like there will be no PRs today.
Right.
But this is going to be awesome. It's just, it's all about the mental mindset of where you land.
Yeah. Yep. We were in Lake Placid. Kenny made it around on his 2 loops. I made it 1 3/4 around before they pulled everybody out of the swim. Now I have to run an extra half mile in bare feet to get to transition to even get to my bike because of the way I got pulled out of I didn't get pulled. They directed us to shore. Mm-hmm. So I came out of the water under my own power. Now I'm running down the street. I get out, I get through transition. I get on my bike. It's pouring rain. The water off of my front tire is soaking each foot as I'm pedaling on either side of my bike. And I don't know what the temperature was, but it was chilly. Like it felt cold. I'm wet. I'm soaked. It's cold. We're getting ready to climb out of Lake Placid itself to go out to the top of Keene. And I'm thinking, man, this is going to be a long day. But I thought to myself, I'm like, literally, I'm thinking of the guys in buds in Navy SEAL training laying in the surf with a telephone pole across their chest doing sit-ups with the surf coming over their head. And I'm like, they can do that. I can stay on this bike. And I just kept pedaling and I kept pedaling. And then the clouds went away. The sun came out. The first loop was wet on the ground. The second loop, it was dry. And we hammered and we went the rest of the day. Now, it was not a PR. There was other problems. I think that's the year I also had a flat tire. Like, whatever. It doesn't matter. Or another year I did Placid, I had a flat tire. Not another PR. But I got all those medals. I finished, in more than enough time. I was not near any cutoffs. And we had great races those years.
I will say, and we're spending time here cautioning people on things that can happen. Never forget the opposite can happen too.
Absolutely.
And drawing on my most recent race again, like I just made the comment, as the race progressed, I felt good and I knew I was dialed in. Hey man, if you're in that space, light it up.
Go. Yep.
Go.
Mm-hmm.
And I did.
Great advice.
And I was like, on the bike, I had already thought forward, man, if I get down to 6 miles ish, 7, 8, somewhere in there to go, and I feel like I do right now, I am dropping the hammer. I am going to lay it all out
Whether
there.
the knee feels bad the next day, it's
That's
on.
right. Like I'm
Might
like,
have the
if
D
I
at
blow
the
this
finish
up,
line,
I blow
but
it
whatever.
Up. Yeah.
Don't go to that class on Monday morning.
That's right.
The guy be like, Scott, good to see you again.
But I did though. I got to that point and I remember thinking now, and I did. I went and it was awesome. It's a great feeling. Steven had the same thing at Muscle Man. I know we've talked about it in past podcasts, but you can tell like, hey man, if you're dialed in that day and you're ahead of your goal and you look strong, you green light.
Do it.
Send it.
Great advice. Hopefully that helped the listeners and those that are out there thinking the same thing when you're getting down to that. Don't get too hard on that preconceived time. Harley's asking and, submitted, how do we measure grit and mental toughness, or how do we train specifically to increase the grit and mental toughness? And I recently, I actually got invited to speak to Gabby's basketball team, and they didn't ask that question specifically, but they asked about how do you keep going when you're like so nervous you can't, or you don't want to. And I gave them a pretty academic response at first, right? I wanted to, give them some facts. So I talked about, in the military, they teach combat breathing. Yoga breathing is very similar, where you control your breath, you control your oxygen intake to try to focus yourself on the task at hand. But it also helps calm, certain physiologically your body to be able to just perform and do well. So that was my academic, but then I just talked more about, you have a job to do and you got to go do your job because other people are relying on you to do that job. And I think that even though triathlon, does end up being a very individual sport, you against the course on that day, training mental toughness and grit and, stick-to-itiveness, whatever you want to describe it as, really comes down to, in my opinion, a matter of consistency, of doing it every single day, of getting up at 4:00 in the morning because you've stacked your day with your family and your family life to get your 3-hour ride in, and doing it enough times where it comes down to race day, the sky can open up. You can get, directed to the shore. You can have to run in bare feet. You can ride your bike through water puddles. You can make this thing happen because you're not going to stop until they actually grab you and pull you off the course somehow, or, it becomes unsafe, of course, but that's really where it comes down to it. And I think, Harley's asking the question. I think he's proven time and time again, he's got that, by the types of events that he's signing up for and the types of events he's already completed with his ultras. So that's my take on it. Scott?
Yeah, I would say, got to practice it. Got to practice the mental toughness in your workouts. When I was younger and I was running competitively on a recurring basis, I routinely would imagine somebody one step behind me, breathing on my shoulder, especially in the hard speed workouts, because I know a lot of those our athletes will be doing alone. And even back when I ran in my younger years, I was alone. I always envisioned there is somebody right with me.
Rearview mirror.
Yep. And I am going hard as long as I can to defeat whatever that imaginary demon is that's around me. So practicing it definitely helps. The other thing to remind yourself of, and Sarge, I think this was something that you showed me once. And this is something I do with the high school team that I coach. I huddle them up and I say, reach as far as you can in the sky. And then I pause for a second and I say, now reach higher. And everybody always goes a few inches higher in the air. And then I point out to them, what is the point that I just made to you? And they'll say that we always have more to give. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, you're damn right. So when you get out there and you're hurting and you think, I can't, you immediately flick that switch and you remember you always have more to give. Go.
Yep.
Do it.
It's really funny in the endurance sport how this grit and how this mental toughness excels in all other capacities of life. Like it shows up at work. It shows up with patience. It shows up leading your family. It shows up when times like get rocky, just how you're, to your point, I was told one time, what are you going to do when you're swimming in the channel and it's dark out and you put your hand in the water and you bump something and you're not sure what it is? Are you going to go home and call your mom? No, I'm going to put my other arm in and try to keep moving forward and hope I don't get bit. But like, it's that little stuff that I love, that what starts out as a swim, bike, and a run can transcend so many other areas of your life with grit and character and all of that.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I think that our athletes prove it every day, even though some may think they don't have enough or are questioning it. I think when they get to that race, they get to that environment, they get to that start line, and they're facing whatever it is in their head, whether it's the swim is their big monster that they're trying to get past, or it's just the overall, haven't done this distance before. Trust your training, trust that you've done the work. There's an amazing quote, and I don't know if he made it up or got it from somewhere, but a friend of ours, Brad Schmidt, posted years ago, and I screenshotted it and I saved it, and it just talks about the grind. The grind knows. The grind knows what you put in, and the grind will only give you back on race day what you've put in. It's tallying, it's keeping a ledger on the hours, the pain, the pedal strokes, the steps, the swim strokes, all of that. And if you've put into it, it's going to give it right back to you on race day, and it's going to deliver.
Mental toughness is just not about the part in the middle of the workout either. And I know that's what I just spoke about a few minutes ago. Mental toughness is your alarm goes off at 4 a.m. and you got to put a foot on the floor. Sometimes that's the hardest part of the workout. Mm-hmm. And you know what? The next day comes and you're going to do it again. And the next day comes and you're going to do it again. Yeah.
And I also feel it too. Like I think, and I see another question coming, but one of my least favorite things in the sport to do is run, right? That's in my age now. I don't like it as much as I once did. And mentally getting to the fact of, oh man, I got that 20-mile run on Sunday and it's Monday. My mentality is I want to do it Tuesday and get it over with and be done with it, because now it just looms and I see it. And that's part of me staying inside my head of, okay, you've done it a million times. Don't worry about it. Don't do anything different. Wake up at the same time, one foot in front of the other. And next thing you know, you'll click one off, you'll click two off, you'll click three off. And I think, to your point, that mental toughness of being okay with your training block of what's coming, that week you're looking at, that hard workout that you don't want to, but being present and showing up. I think that's half the battle too.
Right.
Tanza and I were just talking about this because he made a comment about a long swim and the anxiety with it. And I said, look, man, you ever swim 100 meters? He was like, yeah, did it yesterday, multiple times.
Do it 4,000 times.
Yeah. I'm like, 40, go 100. And
40,
you know what?
40 times.
Yeah. But I mean, do it.
Yeah. I'm like, swim 100, and then you're just going to swim another 100, and you're just going to swim another 100, and you're just stacking them.
Yeah.
You'll be fine.
Yeah.
You'll be totally fine.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, it's great. It's good advice. And I think that leads us right into, Ben's question that you just answered for him. What's your least favorite part of triathlon, and why is it always the run? That was Ben's question. He's kind of leading the witness with that. Kenny answered it. That's
mine.
The run. I'll answer it. The run. And for me, just to explain, I was not born a runner. As far as I didn't.
Nor
really
was I.
Grow up running. I ran when I needed to. I ran for football. Our school was so small that if you were on the football team, you had to run spring track, because that was your springtime, conditioning.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I really disliked track meets. The anxiety for me was up there for having to just do running events. I tell people today, I will rather train and go run an Ironman, a full 140.6, than to go to Pittsburgh and run 26.2.
Huh.
Just something in my head. I'd rather have the 26.2 is a means to an end of being an Ironman. 26.2 in Pittsburgh is a means to me being anxious about having to run 26.2 miles. It is.
I hate it so much too. And I've done it 19 full marathons finished.
Yeah.
And I say it all the time. Like, I hate it. I don't want to do it. Somebody be like, hey, do you want to run 20? Okay, I'll sign up for it again.
And until I became a coach, I was horrible at managing my other two sports inside the triathlon. I would hammer the hell out of the bike, and I always did. And then I would just, hang on in the run.
Or as you said, eat crap and die.
Eat crap and die on the run, and just gut it out, and just gut out a half-assed run / maybe a walk here and there, and if, get it done and then be done. And that was it. And I was okay with it. That was my race strategy, and it wasn't a great one, I don't think, now that I've been trained as a coach and I see how things can go differently and how there's better ways to maybe stack that. But I just want to give us some explanation about why I'm choosing that or why I'm saying it, and it's just because of the way I've not focused on it as much. Even though I did volume, I did the runs I needed to do, I was physically prepared to be able to do it. It's just the way it works. And which you would think, after my other stories of not being able to swim, that I would be anxious about the swim. But I actually enjoy the swim. I actually enjoy racing swims more than training swims. I love being in there with the other couple hundred people or whoever's around me. I love bumping and grinding, maybe strategizing. Am I going to pass this person? Or are they going to pass me? If that guy touches my feet again, I'm kicking him in the goggles, whatever. I'm thinking all the time. So I love that part now, which is really cool. So
Scott, I'm definitely going to say
different.
It's got to be the swim, because you love the bike.
Well, I would say, it definitely was the swim to start. When we did that, there was a swim bike race that Kenny and I did at Cedar Point. That swim was miserable,
Brutal.
very rough conditions.
Horrific.
And I didn't know any better. I finished it. I think if I was looking at that water today, the pucker factor would be even higher.
Smelled like diesel. We were in with boats.
Yeah, it was
Your hands were touching the bottom of the water.
But that swim was what I needed, because when we went to Maryland and did the chop tank was very choppy that day. And
I love that they're like, we're not going to have the swim because there's small boat advisories.
Yeah.
or we're not going to let boats in, small boat advisory, but let the swimmers let the swimmers go figure it out.
They're not small boats.
Yeah.
Over time, though, I have really come around on the swim. Like, I'm okay with it. And I remember, I think it was maybe the second time I did Placid when we were up there. And I can remember being in the water, and it was projected to be a very, very hot day. So I knew the run was just going to be brutal. And I remember on the second lap of the swim thinking, this might be the best part of the day right here.
Yeah,
Water's cool. I'm not overly taxed. I think that was sort of the moment where I kind of turned the corner and realized, like, I kind of like them all now. Run has always been my most comfortable, obviously. I would say actually, though, bike is probably my favorite. I love to go. I love the speed of the bike. I love the mechanic, like just getting down an arrow and just blasting. There was a moment where Kenny and I were riding at Placid during the race together. So we had managed that our paths in the race crossed, and it was like maybe mile 80 on the bike, and we rode the bike in the rest of the way together. And Kenny gave me one of the biggest in-race compliments I ever received, which was he said, "Damn, man, you just look like a machine. Like you are just down and just going,
grinding." And then somebody cut you off, and you almost went over the handlebars. You remember?
So I hammered the front brake, put the bike up on the front tire, bounced in midair, and then just slowly leaned backwards.
Oh,
and then the bike
in his
went back
fashion,
down.
he goes, "Oh, sweet, that was pretty cool." I was like, "I don't know that was cool. I might be quitting."
Pretty cool. I didn't endo right there.
Honest to God, Ironman can hit me up anytime they want. 1.2 mile run, 112 mile bike, 20 mile swim. I'm in. Hit me up, like, honest to
I
God.
wondered where you were going with that. I wasn't sure if you had the math.
Hit me up with that. I would absolutely do that. Jeez. It would be a little bit different.
Yeah,
26 point. Yeah, but give me longer on the swim.
Yeah,
less on the run.
Yeah.
Even on the bike.
Yeah. Well, everybody has it out there. So, and I know there's probably varied opinions on each of these. I know we've talked to athletes that are just getting into the bike and they're scared of the bike right now. So what was your weakness will become your strength as long as you're focusing on your plan, you're doing the workouts, and you're, being a student of the element that you're working on, and you'll learn more about it. So it's awesome. All right. So is there a time where was there ever a race that you thought you weren't going to be able to complete, whether it was anything for any reason, but you still finished it, right? So could you talk more about how you overcame whatever that was?
Oh, well, Ironman number 1. So I was a very strong runner back then. That was bigger runner, 3:30 Pittsburgh Marathon, 1:30, 13:1. And I was training with Matt Moclair and Ben Earl Jack in the young days, Boomer Hughes, and going through it with those guys. They had the plan. I was just following it, and I kept hammer the run. And I kept saying, I'll sit on the bike and just plow through it. I know I'm strong. I won't really focus on it and go after and hit the hills. I really didn't have a training plan. I was just going by, hey, what are you guys doing today? We're going to swim. I didn't know a good distance. I just would go. So I got through the swim. I got so excited. I jumped down. They had a stripper yank my suit off. I yanked my legs up, and I could feel like something pull, like I'm already cramping in the morning just out of the swim. I'm like, oh gosh. So I get on the bike and I blasted, I think, the first loop in Placid, which you want to make that your slower loop. The second one's going to go faster. I think I was like a 2:55 on that, which was good for me, and I hit it. But on the second loop, I could feel my hips, my quads, everything, to the point I'm going up the hill back into town, and I'm pushing my legs to try to get them up and down. And I'm up on the hill, and I'm thinking, oh my God, this is not good. I feel like I'm going to go backwards. To the point I managed to get up the hill. I managed to get off the bike. ladies like jump off the bike. I had to continue to move myself to the right, like an inch, like sliding myself so that she could lower the bike so that I could eventually lift my foot maybe like 4 inches off the ground just to slide it over the bike. I couldn't even run, to the point of, he said to me early on, like, don't make eye contact with anybody. They're going to pull you. Just keep your head down and move.
I did. I was spectating for him that race, and we were looking for him, and I just said, look, just keep going, bud.
I knew at that point it was going to be a really long. That was a 1440, I think, 1540, and one of the I never throw up. I could eat anything on the course. I threw up right by the subway in Lake Placid in the corner. I walked off the course and did it. I ended up feeling a little better about mile 20 with the chicken noodle soup. It was. I would definitely say the hardest thing I ever did, but in my mindset, Murph was there. My family was there. My daughter was there. Sarge was there. My mom was there. Damn it. Everybody came to see me. So put your big boy pants on and move, whatever that is. And ideally, I wanted a 12-hour. I wanted a 13-hour. I wanted to be able to run at the end. I didn't have it. So if I didn't have the horse, I'm going to ride a cow, and I walked it out. And I ended up making it. And the next year, I think I came back and I hammered. I think I did a 5:13 a month later at the Rev, because I was embarrassed. Matty Moe and Brucey, all the guys saw me there fail. In my mind, I failed. In my mind, I should have thought I won because I had it, but I let those guys down. I trained with them. What the heck? So and then I came back the next year 3 hours faster, because I knew at that point, I can't just train one. I have to train all three. That's not a distance that you can load up on one. If like Sarge said a second ago, if you had a weakness, you build on it today. Maybe it's not your weakness. If you could just get decent at all three, you're going to have a good day. Yep. You don't have to excel at all three. Just be decent, comfortable. So that would have been mine, Ironman 1. And that's where I met Coach Nelson too.
Yeah, we met Nelson there. Absolutely. And I saw the whole thing. So, and there would have been no second guessing if you didn't finish it, because you were having such a tough day. There would have been no second guessing that, but you were not on cutoffs, so there was no real worry that was going to happen.
I kept seeing people laying on the ground,
but it would have just been you giving up, and it didn't happen.
Laying on the ground, asking to be pulled one after another, and I just kept saying, like in William Wallace, just say freedom, and it's all over. Just say I'm done, and it's all over. And I'm not going to be that. I don't want to be that.
Yep. Coach Scott, anytime you tested?
Man, I have routinely blown up multiple 70.3s. So the training pattern that I normally would do is I do a 70.3 about a month and a half ahead of my fulls. And I did it to get the cobwebs out mostly, and just to get back in the racing
Syracuse.
Group. Oh, dude, I totally nuked Syracuse.
Is that the
year.
one?
Yeah, it was like 6.5 hours for me, which I
didn't think it was. I thought it was closer to 6.
No, I was well over 6.
What was the first one that you were just like?
Muncie. I did the same thing in Muncie.
And I said to Trace, I'm like, if he
was over 6.
She's like, he changed his shirt. I'm like, dang it, because he'd be at 550.
I would have been right. I would have been just under. But I blew up the run that day. My run was hideous. But the thing, like mentally for me, it always rattles me, because like Syracuse for me was 6.5 hours, and then I went to Placid like 6 weeks later, and I dropped an 11-hour full. And I was like, well, if you do the math, I was like, you could take either half of the full, and I was an hour faster than I was just a few weeks ago with Syracuse. Yeah. And then I did the same thing.
Hey, hold your thought there. Syracuse, what is the deal with the hill there? There's a hill when you look at their athlete guide. It looks like you're going upside down.
Oh man, it is brutal. I actually, so this is a very funny story, not to deviate too far here, but I was flying down that hill. It literally is like a V. It is frightening. And a bird flew through my front tire, like literally went through the spokes. And it was like a burst of feathers everywhere. Like it was
Randy Johnson when he hit the ball.
Yeah. But it was a moment in a race where you're like, whoa.
Why do I feel like Victory's going to get a letter from PETA today?
I know.
Hey, did Scott Powell really kill that bird 8 years ago?
Nah, just repeatedly like blowing up 70.3s. I've done it like 3 times, but then every time it's a healthy reminder that I just need to kind of dial it back in for my fulls, and all my fulls have been fine. Knock on wood. I mean, you never know what the next one is around the corner, but yeah.
So I had 2, and they were both Lake Placid full distance Ironman races. So one was my number 2, and it was mechanical. So I had a flat tire, I had a slow leak, and I was grinding, and I'm like, why does this bike feel like it's like just not going? And then the front rim, as you'd hit a bump, you'd hear the rim hit the pavement because it was losing air. So I juiced the air at mile like 80, hoping I could get to 112 on the rest of that air. But by a mile 100, 20 more miles, it was already doing the same thing again. So I'm stopped. Tried to fix my tire, put the new tube in. It was the front wheel, luckily, but put the new tube in. When I went to put the gas, I guess I had crimped it, the tube, and it exploded, popped. So now I had no tube, and I'm out of CO2 now because I used one at 80. Now I've used my second one at mile 100. So I'm literally on the side of the road, bike's upside down, front wheels off. I have this pile of used tubes, tires off. I don't know what to do. So people kept, every once in a while, a racer would say, well, what do you need anything? I'm like, yeah, I need a tube. And the guy throw me a tube. And then I realized I have 404s on, and I had the stem was too short. So then I started to be more specific with my request. So long story short on this one, I end up borrowing products from racers going by, and I finally fixed my bike. But I'm thinking, like, I have 10 miles. Do I walk 10 miles in my socks because I have bike shoes on? I have to carry my bike 10 miles, and then I have to go run the marathon. So I'm probably going to end up missing a cutoff somewhere even if I attempt that. Do I just bag it and wait for the truck to come pick me up and not run, But, just the encouragement, I guess, of even the racers asking, hey, do you need something? Gave me enough, like, kind of switch my brain back on to like, hey, I can MacGyver this. I can figure this out. I can try to fix it. Maybe the van or the motorcycle guy will come by with a tube and a tire, and I'll keep going. But I ended up finishing that one. So that was one. The next one was my third Ironman Lake Placid, which I had undertrained for. I was just not in my head mentally to train properly. Kenny and I went out on a bike, and I went into like a full, at mile 60 or 80, went into a full body cramp. Like I couldn't.
Oh yeah, by the trash can.
Yeah, I couldn't come up the hill coming up towards Adams Township Park. I was totally like depleted.
Kim, get here, Kim, let's go.
So I had to call for a pickup on that training ride, from here, and my wife had to come out and get me into the car, and had to, I didn't go to the dock, but I had to like recover from this depletedness I was in. So that's my training up to this race, and I'm facing this race, and I'm like, oh crap, but I ended up doing it. Now the run was not even a run. It was probably a 26-mile like fast walk, but I got through it. So, I think that's just another example of, I wasn't following any real plan. I knew I was actually missing a lot of training. But I had signed up, I did it, I went, and I, figured I could manage through, and I did, and it hurt. it hurt a lot, but we got it done. But those are times where, the athletes are asking, was there a time where you felt like you were, that the race broke you, or you were about to give up, or maybe even that you were going to hang up your suit and not do triathlon anymore. So there's definitely going to be tests out there. There's just definitely going to be times in your life or times of the year or certain conditions that are going to try to, but there's no reason to stop. There's no reason to give up. You just keep after it and
plug away.
Do your best. Yeah. Keep plugging away, boys, just like Tugboat said. And you'll make it. That's my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So is there any race, and if you've already done it, then let's talk about it, but is there any, call it a bucket list or just like an A race venue that you guys have been looking to do or wanted to do and still have like looming out there that you'd want to try to get to?
Yeah. So 12-mile swim around Key West is one. I think Mont Blanc would be the second one. Those would be the two that I think if I were going to, kind of get after it, those would be the ones I would want.
Okay. All right. The 12-mile swim around Key West just to get back in the water.
Yeah.
Trying to do this reverse Ironman with a 26.2 mile swim.
Yeah, and I don't know why. You know when something lays on your heart and you've seen it and you keep seeing it and you keep getting emails about it. That's one of them. I don't know if it's a great venue, but that's one of the ones that is calling me.
Sounds pretty cool. Sounds pretty cool.
It's calling me out to the water.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. What about you, Coach?
I don't know if I necessarily had one up until this past winter, and I wouldn't mind getting to a world championship in a 70.3. I think 140.6 is probably out of the question just because I know what it takes to do that. I'm probably at a phase in life where that, and just my abilities, my knee, whatnot, like that's just a longer grind. But the fact I got so close in December, like that could happen. I don't know if it ever will, but now I'm like, you know what? Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a possibility.
Ohio, he's the hunter.
Yeah. I think it could definitely be a possibility for you. I mean, there's strategies, right? So you have strategies of, continue to train, continue to perform. You're going to hit on one that's going to be the right one for you. Have your A day. Other people that maybe are quote unquote faster than you don't take the slot. You get the slot, right? So there's a roll down strategy. There's also the longevity strategy. When you become the one of two people in the 70 and up range, right? And you're still racing, right?
Hopefully there's an intersection of age and performance.
Exactly.
In there somewhere.
And there probably is an intersection there. So, but that's pretty cool though, that, the way you've described that race on this podcast and other times we've talked about it, and to get that close on a roll down, and now to have like a little spark of, you'd like to do that. That's pretty cool.
What about you, Sarge?
I mean, my full distances have all been at Lake Placid. And, for as long as that race has been there, I'd like to probably take another run at that one again. I know that other people that we know are thinking the same way. I've always heard great things from some of the other venues. I've just, from experiencing that one from my very first one to the third one that I did, I just love that venue so much. I love the way the town kind of supports the whole race and do that. So that's probably on my list of when we get, Hunter off to college and things slow down slightly, if you call it slowing down or just change priorities again back at home here, that would probably come back up on the list for me for sure. I do not have any desire, even though I said I would never swim and never do triathlon back in 2010 with you, to do a 12-mile, but I will kayak 12 miles for sure around Key West, and I will do whatever in a boat or a kayak or a dinghy to support.
Mackinac Island's calling me too. 8 miles around.
It's an 8 mile. Yeah. So I'm all about the kayak. I can definitely hang for for that much mileage in a kayak. I mean, I did the 30K with you.
What is funny in talking just to the athletes, how the full distance, a lot are talking placid. And I think it's partly because they look up to the coaches and they know you've done it, you've done it, I've done it, Hayden's doing it next year, Nelly has done it, Tugboat's done it, Murph's, like the whole shooting match. So I think that's pretty cool.
I will say, Kenny, you just mentioned Treblant would be a nice course you'd like to take down.
Only if Mathieu does it with me.
So he signed up for this year.
The full distance?
Yeah. And so
the more you try to get out, the more they pull you back in.
So Nelly and I have done that one before. That one's pretty special.
Didn't you speak in French on an Instagram Live, or was that Nelly?
It was Nelly. Great course, though, for the listeners, if you ever have the chance.
Yeah, that's awesome. Best race moment for you, Coach Scott, in any race, small moment in time,
Oh, dude, this is an easy one for me. Freshman in high school, 800 dual meet against Oil City. They had the 1600 and 800 meter state champs went to that school. They were in the open 800. Kid's name was Rediger. The second he was the 1600 champ, the 800 champ. His name was Gonzalez, if I remember correctly. So I was a freshman.
He remembers correctly.
He got it all. He knows what they ate for breakfast that day.
They were a stacked roster, and they were seniors. So I was a freshman, so they were quite a bit older. Their team was stacked. We had no chance in that meet to win as a team. No chance to get any places on the track. Like, it was very thin. Like, it was going into the meet, it was very, very somber kind of feel to it. And I went out in the open 800, and with about 100 meters to go, I was probably in 7th or 8th place. It was a bloodbath. And at that moment, I was like, I am so sick of this day and so sick of our performances. And I am going. And I just dropped the hammer, and everything was a total blur. And I got third.
Suicide pace.
I got third. Mm-hmm. And those two just barely beat me. And it was the best. It was the moment in my running career where I was like, that was it. Like, yeah, I'm here, and damn it, I am not going down without a fight. And dude, it was amazing. I will never, ever forget this, because it was so like uninspired. My English teacher, who was this middle-aged woman who was overweight by all means, not a very physically fit woman, but very supportive of athletics in our school, was always around, was standing at the finish line, runs over and hugs me.
Aww.
And it was like, that was amazing. And I was like, at that moment, I was like, I got third. Best race I ever ran.
Nice.
To date. I will never, ever forget that.
Did you have a music auditorium the next day at 8 in the morning? Oh, God. Scott, you're okay. You did third place. Do what you need to do.
But yeah, that was
that was
pretty
really
special.
Coach Kenny.
Ironman Mont Blanc, or Muskoka. Canada.
Muskoka.
Yes, and only because Murph. That was Murph's first 70.3, and he called me the day before, 2 days before, and he just said, "Get here." And get here meant he was intimidated by the hills, intimidated of everything that was going on. And why it was so special is I knew it would mean more to him if I saw it through and stayed with him and was there than it would be for me to go and do a 5:30 or 5:45 or 6 hour to get a finish. So we got there. Scotty was in the race. You were in the race. There was a pile of us in the race. We had a great time. A beautiful course. Northern Toronto, whatever, up, and so the race went off. I swam like heck. I went in 2 heats after Murph. I caught him and got out of the water before and waded into the biker lane. And the people kept saying, are you something wrong with your tire? You shouldn't be here this long. Why are you here? You could get disqualified. I kept saying my tire is wrong. My tire. Murph came in. And I said, all right, buddy, let's go. Let's go dance. And he's like, what are you doing? I go, I was waiting for you. You didn't think we were going to go at this alone. And him and I rode 56 together, or whatever it was, 58. They do it in kilometers. And it was just
56 miles. It's just in different kilometers.
Yeah, it was odd. And, Murph was laying it on the line, having all kind of gas in front of people, because you had to run through almost like a Giant Eagle parking lot.
You did.
And his lady's pushing a kid, and he does it real loud. And he's like, I'm sorry, ma'am. And the lady's like, just keep going, buddy. And I'm behind him. I'm like, I don't know what's going on with him. And anyways, he finishes, and he had a broken foot, and he kept fighting. And it goes to that mental toughness of pushing through. And being at mile 12 and a half, the finish chute, you're coming up, and right below the hill, you could see everybody, and his family was there, and seeing him cry and seeing him how proud he was, knowing that he accomplished that feat. It was beautiful. And we came in the chute together, and I'll still remember, he's like, we did this, let's go. And I said, this is your time. You roll. And I completely laid back, just so it was all him coming through the finish line. And to me, that embodies every bit of my races, is that moment right there, that I got to do that with him. I got to get a picture with him with our medals, seeing the smile on his face, knowing that, he changed maybe the trajectory of his life that day, finishing something that catapulted him onto Placid, shortly thereafter.
Right. And, mine, Me personally, it was my first full, my first full Ironman in Lake Placid. I was so, call it scared, just apprehensive about the distance. My training really was on point. I worked and worked and worked because I didn't want to have something go wrong and not finish. So it's my best time up there because I didn't have a mechanical. I didn't get, sent to the far shore to get out of the pool or the water, and didn't have environmentals. It was a beautiful day. It was 68 degrees, no temperature issues, no mechanicals. It just was smooth as fast. But the training was really what got me there and got me through it. But to be able to get that, and the moment we were in the village ahead of the race, checking our bikes in and just doing all the things you do to get ready. And I'm with Kenny, and the same guy who's at every race nowadays was there at that race selling the plaques where you could get the medal and your picture and all of that. And he had one of the medals. So we hadn't seen the medal until then. And he tried to hand it to us, and, and we're like, no, we're not touching that until we cross that finish line. And then, the next day or two, whatever that was, we all ended up coming through and finishing that race. And it was pretty cool.
All right. So at what point during the race did you realize I'm going to be an Ironman?
Once I got off the bike, I did that bike, and this is back to my, I hammered the bike. So I did 6 hours and 23 minutes in Lake Placid on the bike. And when I could get off that bike, and they did the same thing to me, they said, just lay the bike down, and then step over it. Don't try to lift your leg completely off of it. So I took the advice. I didn't have too many issues, but I didn't want to have a hip flexor cramp.
Blow out.
But as soon as I was coming in off the Bears, and I'm rolling down Lake Placid Drive to go turn that bike in and get off this machine, I knew I could manage the rest of it. It's like 1 in the afternoon or 2 in the afternoon, whatever it was. I was had plenty of time to gut out this 26.2. But I wasn't even thinking that. I was in the race. I was like, now I'm running. I'm figuring that out. And that was the best part. That was the best part. As a team, as a group of people, this was prior to victory. It was my third one where we assisted Murph in coming through and getting his medal in Lake Placid. We assisted him by being out there and seeing him on the course. We all stayed in transition afterwards. We didn't leave transition because he was still out there. We sent Ron out to run backwards on the run course to tell him not to stop, and just try to feed him some information about, what we were kind of doing, a calculus on a back of a napkin, try to figure out what he had time left, and to be in the transition when he came through, and to get the picture that's here in the clubhouse of Nelly, Murph, Tug, Ron, and Ron's in transition. Ron ran the chute. They tried to give him a medal, I think. No, I don't know if he did, but he ran the chute with Murph and got into transition as a spectator. But just having that moment of in our minds, he
trust.
In our minds, he did it right. And he was there with us, and, he was not doing well because we had some, had to be cared for after that, but he laid it all out on the line, and that was the best.
Yeah.
moment.
He had to go to the hospital, dehydration.
Yeah. Cause it was after, it was right around midnight. So they were already shutting down the medical tent. And so they're like, well, we're not going to give anybody an IV because we don't want them sitting here for an hour and a half to have it drip in. So they put him in the truck and transported him to the hospital to get his IV. So The best part of that was he's like, hey, do you know they charge you for that? Like, he got a bill for like $3,000.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think Sarge is dancing around it, and everybody that knows Murph, he had crapped his pants at like mile 25.8. And the best part about it was we get him into in the transition, and the guy says, do you know where you are? And he's got his medal on, he's got the jacket, and he's like, Yeah, you would think Lake Placid or Iron Man. He just replied back, I have diarrhea. And of course, Tugboat can't hear, and he's screaming, what you say, Murph? You crap yourself. But he said with the SHIT word, and it was epic. We said to Murph, we're like, hey, man, you're going to leave everything out on this course, and you're going to be an Iron Man. Until this day, we always tease him, like, you didn't have to leave everything. There was like a stain on the white mattress.
He had to apologize to the medical people for the stains that he left on the gurney. He's like, oh, I'm so sorry.
And he got a bill. Yeah. Got a bill,
Got
Iron
a bill
Man.
from the hospital.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, those are some of our moments. I think those are all special to all of us. They certainly live in our hearts. Some of them live in photographs here that we've put up on the wall at the
Hall of Fame.
So, we wish these moments for every athlete and for everybody out there listening, that they find that moment that they can remember and they can talk about with their families and their friends and their team and so forth. So it's been a good run here on part 2 of Ask Coaches Anything. Really appreciate everybody listening. You've been listening to the Victory Multisport podcast. We'll talk to everybody soon.